Good afternoon. Welcome to the American Lobster Board meeting. With the retirement of Pat Kelleher last Friday, I have been pushed into the board chair a little earlier than expected, but I'm happy to be here and happy to call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda this afternoon is the approval of the agenda from the last meeting. Are there any additions to be made to the agenda? Seeing no hands, the proceedings from the last meeting and agenda are approved. Apologies for that, the agenda is approved. Next is the approval of the proceedings from February. Are there any changes to the proceedings that were included in our meeting materials? Please raise your hands if anyone has anything to add. Seeing no hands, the proceedings are approved. Next up, the public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda? Please raise your hand. Please keep in mind, if it has to do with items on the agenda, there will be time for public comment on agenda items. So this is specifically items not on the agenda. Go ahead and raise your hand at this time if you have any items. Thank you. I see no hands. Caitlin, just double checking that that's not just me.
I don't see any hands either.
Okay, great. Seeing no hands, move on to the main event of today's meeting. So I am going to pass it to Caitlin for considering draft addendum 32 on repealing gauge and vent size changes of addendum 27 for public comment. Caitlin has a presentation to give to us about this agenda item. Caitlin, without further ado.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So in my presentation, I'm going to start off with going over the draft addendum 32 document. I'll cover the timeline, the objective, background information, and the statement of the problem, and then I'll go through the proposed management options that are included in the document, and we'll wrap up with next steps. So this draft addendum was initiated in February of 2025, and at this current meeting, the board is considering this document to go out for public comment. And if the draft addendum is approved for comment, we would then hold a comment period and public hearings later this month and in April. And the goal is considering the addendum for final approval in May. The board's motion in February gets to the objective of the addendum, which is specifically to repeal the gauge and vent size measures of addendum 27. And the background on this addendum is that addendum 27 was approved in May 2023. And in recognition of low levels of settlement and declining recruitment in the Gulf of Maine from about 2012 forward, the goal of the addendum was to increase protection of the Gulf of Maine spawning stock. Addendum 27 took a proactive approach, establishing a trigger mechanism based on recruitment abundance indices, whereby a series of gauge and vent size changes for LCMA 1, 3, and Outer Cape Cod would be automatically implemented if the trigger was reached. And a trigger index was developed for the addendum using 3 recruitment abundance indices from the Gulf of Maine stock. And the trigger point that was established in addendum 27 was if that trigger index declined by 35% from the reference period, which was the 2016 to 2018 average value of the index. So in October 2023, with the inclusion of the 2022 index data, that trigger index had declined by 39%, and that triggered the implementation of the series of management measures in addendum 27. The original implementation date for the first of those measures, which is the increase to the LCMA 1 minimum gauge size, was set for June 1st, 2024. However, in October 2023, the board delayed the implementation of all addendum 27 measures to January 1st, 2025. And then via addendum 31, the board postponed implementation of the Outer Cape Cod maximum gauge size, V-notch possession definition, and LCMA 1 gauge and vent sizes an additional 6 months to July 1st, 2025. And these delays were to provide the industry and gauge makers more time to prepare for changes and also to coordinate with Canada on management and trade issues. And in the meantime, the lobster industry in the Gulf of Maine continue to express concerns about potential economic impacts associated with the addendum 27 measures, and also uncertainty surrounding how that LCMA 1 minimum gauge size increase would affect trade with Canada. So in February, the board agreed that consideration of alternative management measures was warranted to address these concerns, and the Gulf of Maine states committed to working with their lobster industries to identify alternative conservation strategies. So that brings us to draft addendum 32, and these are the proposed management options. There are two options included in the document: option A, status quo, and option B, to repeal the addendum 27 gauge and vent size measures. Under option A, the current implementation schedule for all addendum 27 measures would be maintained. And this table shows when each of those changes is set to be implemented, with changes shown in bold text. So the LCMA 1 minimum size increase would occur July 1st, 2025. Also on July 1st this year, the maximum gauge size for all permit holders in Outer Cape Cod would be 6 3/4 inches. Then the second LCMA 1 minimum size increase would occur July 1st, 2027, and the LCMA 1 vent size change would occur July 1st, 2028. And then finally on July 1st, 2029, the maximum gauge decrease for Outer Cape Cod and LCMA 3 would be implemented. And then under option B, all of the changes to the gauge and escape vent sizes established by addendum 27 would be repealed, including the maximum gauge change in Outer Cape Cod under section 3.1 of addendum 27, and the minimum and maximum gauge size and vent size changes triggered under section 3.2. Option B would not affect the measures of addendum 27 that pertain to the V-notch possession definition of Outer Cape Cod, nor the issuance of trap tags. So the V-notch definition change would take effect July 1st, 2025, and the trap tag rules are already effective as of January 1st of this year. So with that, the actions for the board's consideration today are to make any desired modifications to the draft addendum document before it goes out for comment, and then to consider approval of the document to be released for public comment. Our next steps, if the draft addendum is approved for comment today, would be to schedule the public hearing and collect written comments. The board indicated at the last meeting that it intended to hold one virtual public hearing on this draft addendum. And then after the comment period in May, the board would be able to consider the addendum for final approval. I can take any questions.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Are there any questions from board members for Caitlin on her presentation and on steps moving forward?
Renee, are you able to see hands?
I see no hands if there are hands up. So if you or Tony are willing to help with that, that would be wonderful.
Yes, we can do that. I have David Borden, Grant Moore. Grant will wait on that, and then Emerson and Jeff Kalin. So David, Emerson, Jeff.
All right, so thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a question on section 3.0, the second paragraph. And this type of question normally goes, I think, to Bob Beal, but Caitlin, if you can answer it, that's fine. The issue of picking any action between what was proposed and what is now being proposed, and I'll give you two examples. I think where at least I'm hearing more opinion from people in the industry that they want to do something, but there's no consensus. So I think we potentially could be in a situation after the hearings where we have an option that might come forward either on the gauge size changes or the issue of issuing extra tags. And I'll give you an example of each. If somebody wanted to propose doing a 32nd of an inch gauge increase every other year, that would clearly fall within the confines of the options that are taken out to public hearing. And on the extra tags, I've heard suggestions that some individuals would think that we should have at least some tags available for fishermen to get. So the specific suggestion was made to me that we be allowed not allow the 10%, but allow fishermen to get 20 tags, for instance. My question is, do those types of suggestions at a public hearing fall within the confines of the statement under section 3.0?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think I'll answer the second part.
My answer is I think they do, but I want to just confirm that my interpretation is correct.
Yeah, so I believe that the tag issue is not necessarily within the confines of this addendum because it's not considered as part of this addendum. So I think if the board wanted to consider something different with the trap tags, it would need to be added to the draft addendum for comment. And as to the gauge increase, for example, changing it to 1/32, I don't know if I have a great sense, and maybe Tony can help out with this. I don't know if it's really within like repealing versus not repealing, which is our two options kind of in this addendum. So I don't know. Tony, if you want to jump in.
I can help out, Caitlin. David, I would say that it's not within the confines of this document because we're saying we're removing the requirement to have these gauge changes in total. So if the board, and even if you wanted to, even if we could interpret it as potentially something within the confines, whatever it would be, it would have to be in place immediately. So it would have to be in place by July 1 of 2025. And I'm not sure that that's within the administrative possibilities for some of the states to do so. So if we wanted to go back and do a different path forward, then I would suggest we do a new addendum document for whatever new paths forward are brought forward by the states.
Okay, so thank you, Tony. I just wanted to make sure because I think that paragraph is going to get interpreted different ways by different members of the public. That's all. Thank you.
I have hands visible to me now, so let's go ahead and go to Emerson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Caitlin, for your presentation. So my question has to do with one of the other motions that was passed at the last Lobster Board meeting, and that was to task the staff to prepare and send a letter to the commissioners from Maine and New Hampshire with both governors copied on that. So two-part question. One is, has that letter been sent? And then secondly, has there been any response to the commission from that letter? Thank you.
Bob has his hand up. Bob, go ahead and respond if you don't mind.
All right. Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And hey, Emerson, this is Bob Beal. How you doing? Yeah, the letter is, we're still drafting it. We've had a number of iterations that have been going through between the chair of the commission and Dan McKiernan as vice chair and myself, and just sort of thinking about the right tone of that letter. So it has not been sent yet. And, you know, there's the Maine Fish Forum took place a couple of weeks ago. We were having conversations up there with the industry, you know, on the side just to see where things stood. So we're wrapping up that letter right now, and we'll probably get it out and include an update on what happens in this meeting. So if a document is approved for public comment by the board before this meeting's over, we can include that sort of current status of draft addendum 32 in that letter. So it's you know, still in the works, but we're getting close to sending it out next few days, hopefully.
Thank you.
Beth, Caitlin.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So I had concerns similar to Mr. Borden's, and I'm glad that Mr. Emerson brought up the letter because I was wondering about that too. I think there's a lot in this document that I think needs to be reestablished for the public that's not in here now, including the fact that there was a motion on the letter. The way I read this, you know, there wouldn't really, I think we need to clarify that that we're looking for alternatives from the public, alternative conservation strategies. I assume that would meet the 35% trigger target, which has already been triggered. But none of that's stated here at all. There's no deadline for the public to consider something being done. This is just simply eliminating basically the entire amendment, the way this thing, including going back to 27 from what we just talked about a minute ago. So I think there's a lot missing here, including the fact that we're going to take final action on it in May. I suppose that'll be filled in once we approve a document. But I think a timetable for next steps has to be identified in this thing, and basically provide the public with some understanding of what the commission's next steps are going to be. And I hope it's not that we're going to put things off for another year or two. We've already done that twice. So there's quite a bit here that's missing, as I just stated. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Renee, can I jump in really quick and just follow up for a couple things? While I wasn't at the last board meeting, I have gone back and listened to it and reread through the minutes. And the board, there was the motion for the letter, which, requested that the 3 states work together in talking with their industry to develop some alternative management measures. Those management measures were not a were not a requirement of this addendum document for how the motion was written for writing this document. So therefore, staff did not include any requirements of alternative measures to be developed. In addition, there was no timeline associated with those alternative measures that, the board just asked for the states to continue to come back at each quarterly meeting and provide an update of where folks were. So at this time, we didn't add anything because there wasn't any requirements associated with the motion for the addendum.
So Madam Chair, Madam Chair, would that be appropriate to make some kind of a motion like that today and add something like that, which is sorely missing, I think. I don't have a motion. I'm not, a lobster guy, but I used to be. But I think a motion would be appropriate today to expand this, to have something that talks about where we're headed when we go out to the public, because again, I think that's missing. So thanks, Tony. I appreciate recognizing exactly where we are. So I'll just stand by. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And if we could hold motions for just some board comment and questions, and we'll certainly get to that portion. All right, next up, Dennis Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Kalin hit on a lot of things that were concerning me. When I read paragraph 2.2, the last sentence says that concurrently with this action, the Gulf of Maine states will hold scoping discussions with their lobster industries to identify alternative conservation strategies to protect the long-term health of the resource. It just strikes me as we can't require the industry to do anything, but at the last meeting, the industry representatives unanimously spoke up and said they wanted to be involved. But them wanting to be involved and us requiring them to furnish us with anything is beyond our scope, I think. We can deal with LCMTs, but my question that goes into my mind is, when would we be expecting any input from industry? Are we going to wait until the assessment is given to us and then at that point have a tasking to do something? because I feel that without any industry input, we won't be able to go anywhere because we're now dealing in the political realm with the governors of Maine and New Hampshire in particular, as far as going anywhere. So we need some input at this point in time or soon from the industry to alternatives to what we can do for lobster management. And everything that Jeff Kalin said, I agree with 100%. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Megan Ware.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge people's concerns and give an update from Maine. So Maine, even though we have not received the letter yet, we have started a round of zone council meetings. So we've only had 2 of those at this point, but we should complete that round. We have 7 different zones in Maine. We should complete that ahead of the May board meeting. Some of the things we've been doing at the zone council meetings this round has been providing folks an update on what's happened at the February board meeting, some of the comments that were given, and then going through recent landings and efforts data and trying to understand if people are agreeing with the trends they're seeing, disagreeing, are they concerned? If not, why? And having that conversation. So we have started that in the absence of the letter. And I'm happy to provide an update at the May board meeting. I think it may take 2 rounds to have the full conversation, a lot of digesting and questions at this point, but wanted to give an update from Maine. Thanks.
Thank you for that update, Megan. I have a couple hands. I just want to make sure that these aren't still lingering. David Borden, your hand is up. Is that correct? Great. Emerson, your hand is also up. Did you have follow-up comments you wanted to make?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have the same concerns as Jeff Kalin and Dennis Abbott, which is why I asked that question about the letter. So when you're ready, Madam Chair, I have a draft motion that I can put up for discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson. Go around the room one more time. Any other board members that have questions or comments regarding this item? Seeing no hands at this time, willing to entertain some motions. And to the public, I know there have been members interested, kind of as motions go up and as appropriate, we'll go out to the public for public comment as well. So Emerson, if you had something you wanted to put forth, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a draft, and if it gets seconded, I'm open to friendly modifications to it. So I would move to add an item to option B in the addendum that says that Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts will provide to the board by the winter 2026 meeting consensus positions to be the basis of future actions, future addendum actions affecting the biological productivity of the Gulf of Maine lobster fishery.
Moved by Emerson Husbrook. Do we have a second? Jeff, are you seconding the motion?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Seconded by Jeff Kalin. Emerson, back to you for any rationale.
The rationale is kind of what Jeff and Dennis have already stated, as well as the issue that Dave Borden brought up about, options that may not be specific in this document. So I don't think that we want to just leave it at repealing the items that are going to be repealed in this addendum. I think we need to chart a path forward to get back on track to address biological productivity of the Gulf of Maine lobster fishery. So that's my primary concern, my primary reason for making this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson. Jeff, over to you as the seconder. Any rationale or comments?
Yeah, so why wouldn't this say winter of 2025? Because that's a long time to wait for the industry to come back to us on a bunch of issues that they're intimately familiar with. Puts it off a long time. And I like the motion generally. That's why I seconded it. But I have a question about that. And then to me, I think it should say winter 2025, with the intention that changes be put into effect by, I don't know, April 1 of 2026 or something like that. Some kind of a complete timetable for the public to understand in terms of our taking some action. We know that lobster landings went down to a 15-year low in 2024, for example. So I like the motion. I'm speaking in support of it, but when we get to the friendly amendment part, as I just mentioned, I have a couple of ideas possibly to improve it, at least from my perspective. Thank you.
Okay, we have a whole slew of hands up now, and I do see hands from the public as well, so I will get to you. Next up, David Borden.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Caitlin. Will the results of the benchmark stock assessment be available at the fall meeting, the 2025 fall meeting? Is that correct?
Yes, that is our current schedule, would be that it will be peer reviewed and ready for the board to review in the October meeting.
Okay, so I like, personally, I like the motion. I commend Emerson and Jeff for making it, but I agree with Jeff's suggestion that I think it should be 2025. If Mr. Hasbrook and Jeff would consider that perfection, I'd be happy to support it.
Renee, just to jump in, that the winter meeting is February, so that meeting has, is already passed. So you would, I think maybe you're wanting the annual meeting of 2025, perhaps, but I'm not sure.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think annual meeting would be better than the winter meeting in 2026. But good, thanks, Tony. I'm glad you're on.
And then I will just say that if you're saying that there needs to be some information provided to the board at the annual meeting in 2025, having an addendum be finalized by April of the following year could be very tight. It depends on what product is given to the board at that annual meeting. So I just would want the board to recognize that we may need a little wiggle room there.
Would July be a better time frame?
I would suggest August, since that's when our summer meeting would be.
Well, Emerson, it's your motion, but I think changing those dates would be an improvement.
Yeah, can I respond, Madam Chair?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Emerson.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so I just put that in there as a draft because I wasn't sure when our stock assessment was going to be available, and I wasn't sure how quickly these states were going to be able to meet with their industry. But originally, I had thought that maybe the annual meeting would be appropriate, but I just delayed for no particular reason other than to give those 3 states time to meet with their fishermen. So I'm fine with changing this to the annual 2026 meeting. And also, we just heard from Maine that they've already initiated discussions with their industry. So I'm willing to change it to August even if the states of Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts think that they will have had meaningful discussions and input from their industry by that point in time.
Madam Chair, could I jump in with a question? This is Kate. I think Emerson just stated annual 2026, but I think he meant 2025, so I want to clarify that.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting my ears mixed up here, sorry.
Okay. And then my additional question is, the motion says that the states would provide consensus positions to be the basis of future addendum actions. And I want to know what consensus positions means to you and what we'd be looking for from them specifically.
To me, it means specifically what's in the letter that's being sent to those states. I think that's what was part of the motion, wasn't it? for those states to meet with their industry and develop consensus actions?
So management actions, possible management actions to pursue.
Yes, in fact, I'm looking now, the motion that was passed, and one of the bullets is request Maine officials to begin scoping discussions with industry leaders, Maine's Marine Fisheries Advisory Council, Maine Zone Councils, and the Canadian government and Canadian lobster fishing area representatives to identify mutually agreeable conservation strategies and schedules for future addenda. So that's what I'm referring to. And the next bullet says ensure Maine entitles develop consensus positions to the degree possible before the board considers incorporating them in any future addendum affecting the biological productivity of the Gulf of Maine lobster fishery. So I'm just taking that from the motion that was passed, sending out that letter. So whatever the final version of that letter is relative to the biological productivity of the Gulf of Maine lobster fishery.
Thanks, Emerson.
Thanks, Emerson. Next up, I have Richie White. Richie, go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm still not clear on consensus. Does that mean that the 3 states have to be in consensus? Is that consensus just industry? Is that consensus the decision of the state to back a proposal from industry? So I'm still not quite sure exactly what you're looking for there. Secondly, I think this is probably premature in that the stock assessment we will be getting at the annual meeting. And I think it's not smart to take action prior to that, because the action that we might take might not be enough if the stock is overfished or overfishing is occurring. So I think that waiting until we get the stock assessment and then take action to address this issue as well as any issues that might come up at the stock assessment, I think would be a smarter path. Thank you. But otherwise, I think the idea of the motion, is a good idea to start to make sure that we're going to have the discussions and that we are definitely going to get back to the commission. Thank you.
Emerson, did you want to respond at all to the intent of consensus in your motion?
Well, again, similar to what I previously answered, it kind of depends on how the letter to those states is worded. And I understand from Bob's earlier response to my question that still is being worked on. And I'm going by what was in the board's approved motion to have those states identify mutually agreeable conservative strategies and to develop consensus positions. So I think the consensus positions need to be between the states and their fishermen. And then if the states can also get together to provide consensus amongst the states, that's even better. But I think the initial step is for the states to have discussions with their fishermen, which it sounds like Maine is already doing. And I'm willing to change this to either the August 2025 meeting or the annual 2025 meeting, depending on what the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts think their timeline is going to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson. Dan McKiernan.
Yes, thank you. I'm opposed to the motion. The way I see this is we have a very tight time frame between now and July 1st, when 2 states are going to be found out of compliance. That's an important deadline. And we also have the expectation of the assessment coming out in October. And we can anticipate a few scenarios coming out of that assessment, including whether or not the stock is overfished and whether or not overfishing is occurring. And if a scenario plays out where there's no overfishing and overfishing is not occurring, then I go back to the original premise of Maine's goals, or I'm sorry, the Maine Commissioner's goals, former Maine Commissioner, who was concerned that given the decline in stocks, that it would inflict a lot of pain on the waterfront in Maine because of the dependence of the industry on lobster. And so I think it's important to understand that we may need to address the economics of this fishery, but beyond the conservation issues within the fishery. And that's why I think it's appropriate to pass the original proposal it's in the addendum, and then wait until October and take a look at what the new mandates are going to be on us. And I want to remind the board and Emerson, I don't need to pick on you. I don't mean to pick on you, but I just want to clarify that consensus is what I'm asking for to come out of the state of Maine, because it was basically the Maine industry that undermined this, or the Maine scene that undermined this addendum. My regulations are enacted. I have to go in and unravel them. And so what I want to do is I want to have Maine come to a consensus, and then we'll take a look at it. Because if we just go forward with 3 states like we did before and the delegations voting and have 1 or 2 states pull the plug on it, that's not acceptable to me. I want to see what Maine wants to do, because the decline in Maine is way more severe than the other 2 states in the Gulf of Maine. So, and as far as Massachusetts meeting with its industry, this letter was being sent to New Hampshire and Maine because Massachusetts adopted the rules, and we don't have any intention of repealing them unless, of course, well, the board votes to do that, and we'll comply with the board. So I would urge the board, and I appreciate the sentiment that I think it's very important to be responsible and to try to do what's best for this industry. But I think timing is important, and I'm thrilled that Maine has already begun those conversations. And there may be ways to improve this fishery in terms of the economics and the conduct in many ways. But I think the outcome of that assessment could change things a lot in terms of what our mandates are. So I think it's best, as Richie said, to wait until the outcome of the assessment. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And putting on my New Hampshire hat for just a moment here, New Hampshire has every intention of beginning industry meetings in early May. So just to chime in on that aspect as well. Okay, next up is Dennis Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, in agreement with just about everything that's been said. And one thing is, I'm not sure if we're putting the cart ahead of the horse, because we don't know what the results of the assessment is going to be. It's possible that the assessment might say that we're down below the 35% trigger and no action is required. Although, going back to Pat Kelleher's reason for doing this, he was trying to be on the safe side of things. So I'm very interested in what's going to come out of the state of Maine. I would like to see the industry step up and say, based on the decline that we've seen in the trigger index, then what are your alternatives? What alternatives do you want to do? And another point, there's a lot of moving parts here. We haven't even mentioned the fact of where's Canada on this? Is Canada still going to be influencing our final decisions? Also, I might note that New Hampshire did adopt the Addendum 27 or 31 requirements, and rules were put in place. And I'm not sure, Renee can probably clarify whether you've had to rescind them based on what our governor did a couple months ago. So again, I think that I would like to see something before the assessment comes out of what tools we could put in our toolbox that are acceptable to the industry in Maine in particular. And then based on the results of the assessment, then we would be looking forward to either having an addendum or not, give us some direction at that point in time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Megan Ware. Megan, your hand is down.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay,
Can you hear me
no
now?
problem.
So I was just saying, I appreciate the board's concerns here, and I think what I'm hearing is a desire to outline clear expectations, which I'm not opposed to it by any means. I do think, something we haven't talked yet about is the layers of everything that's going on. So we've talked about the assessment coming out in October. I think that's going to be really important, as others have mentioned, to understand if we're overfished or overfishing and what's getting triggered through that. Also be important in terms of kind of grounding the industry as to what we've seen since the last assessment, which I suspect will have very different results than the 2018 assessment, or 2020 assessment, excuse me. And then I think the other thing that's happening here is the whale conversation. We are expected to start TRT discussions in November and then vote on a final package in January. So from my perspective, I think if this motion is going to move forward, the winter 2026 meeting has some advantages just to understand the playing field a little bit better. But I do agree. I think timeliness of this addendum that we're voting on today is paramount in terms of 2 states potentially going out of compliance, which we want to avoid. And I think at the February policy board meeting, I had suggested that by May, Maine will have gone through a round of zone council meetings. Happy to provide an update on what we've heard at that point. We may have a better understanding as a state of how many rounds of zone council meetings we need to do in our timeline to be able to provide some positions. So that might be a good opportunity, particularly in person, to discuss the best path forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. I have Bob Beal, please.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Megan said a lot of what I was going to say, actually, but just, folks have asked about the letter. It's still in the works, but, one of the closing sentences in the letter currently is that, the board requests an update from Maine at each of the quarterly meetings coming up. So, the Maine will be asked to give an update in May and August and October. And I'm not speaking for or against this motion. I just want folks to know that there will be regular updates that on how the conversations are going up in Maine, coming back to the board, and maybe, based on the progress or lack of progress, the board can, see where things are coming out of the New England states and, decide if a timeline is needed then, or they can do it now. The other thing to think about is, if a date or a timeline gets put into this draft document, it's just going out to public hearing. And the public can then comment on it, and the board can take it out later if they would like. Or, the other way to look at it is, will a timeline make these public hearings or public hearings singular, more difficult and be a distraction from the core of just trying to repeal the gauge size changes and bend size changes that are sort of coming up fast on a couple of the states here. So just some thoughts, but the board will get an update at each of the quarterly meetings on how the conversations are going.
Thanks, Bob. Next, I have Joe Cimino.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I hope everyone can hear me. I didn't do a mic check earlier. Yeah, I'm against this motion for the same reasons that Dan spoke to. I guess wearing my chairman's hat, I think it was a more elegant solution. I think, I share the same concerns for the stock, but I think this may actually tie up the process. It may force us into another addendum process before we're ready to go there. I haven't heard anything talked about, but I am also assuming that some of the solutions the options that may be drafted for a new addendum would have to run through a technical committee. I would like to make sure that there's good time for all that to play out. We've committed to having updates at every quarterly meeting. So I think this board will have a chance to, pivot and take the actions they think appropriate as we move forward. But there's a lot of moving parts as Megan talked about, and I think the premier thing is to get this document out so that we can do that repeal if that's what we think is necessary. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Jeff, you have an additional comment?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate. I think it's been a good conversation, and if this dies, and I imagine it will, the document still is silent on what our plans are, as described by both the commission chair and vice chair in the last few minutes, and none of that's in this document. And I think it ought to be in there. Apparently, we need a motion to add anything, but this is important. I understand that in terms of avoiding any potential for finding states out of compliance. I'm not interested in that at all. But I think we could do a much better job with the document in describing for the public what the commission's expectations are relative to the assessment coming in, the timing of that, and so forth. And, ideally, to me, it makes sense to have the states consider consensus positions. Frankly, what I would do if this was going to survive is I'd change consensus positions and stick in the language from the letter to be a little more clear on what our expectations are. But what is the timing on that? When do we expect that to happen? It might be a good idea for the states to come in and tell us in our August meeting what's going to happen with the assessment coming up in October, and then have some ability for the technical committee to crank away at some of those ideas that come from the public. But again, none of that's outlined in the document, and I still have, even if this goes down in flames, just want to go on record and saying I think the document needs to be improved in that area. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Seeing no other members of the board, I'm going to go out to the public on this motion. Virginia Olson, you've had your hand up for a bit now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I appreciate all the conversation that's taken place today. I would like to see everyone just hold for a pause. Maine's fishermen are engaged. We had a problem where they did not receive any democratic process, the LCMTs. We were denied those meetings. We need to be able to speak with fishermen so we have their buy-in on a change. If we don't have their buy-in, we're going to be sitting right where we are at the end of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Go back to the board one more time before we call a vote on this motion. David, I see your hand.
Okay, so I've listened to the commission chairman and vice chair's comments. I'd like to suggest a substitute and I'm happy to do it as a perfection if the maker and the seconder of the motion agree. Basically, to have the first, first four lines would remain the same down to the winter 2026, change 2026 to 2025. And then after that, say meetings, and then before consensus, add the word state consensus positions with a period and remove the rest. So I'll suggest that as a substitute motion.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a move to substitute. Caitlin or Tony, feel free to chime in if you feel a friendly amendment to this with the approval of the maker and seconder would be more appropriate.
I think a substitute is probably cleanest, and before we can get a seconder, but it might be good to get this substitute up before we can all see what we're actually talking about here. So So again, I'll say that the winter 2025 meeting has already passed.
Yeah.
So we would, that's not quite, I don't know whatever date you're looking for.
So it's winter 2026 then, Tony.
Okay, that stays the same. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess my other question to you, David, is by adding this to the option B, where you're stating that there will be requirements for the states to have a consensus position by winter of 2026. I'm just making sure that that's clear on and I don't on something that I don't know what that consensus position is.
So I think, Madam Chair, it's probably best to try to get a second on this, and then if we do get a second, I'd like you to come back to me and I'll give you the logic for it and factor in the point that Tony made.
I'll second.
I have my hand up a second too. Go ahead, Dennis. I have my hand up also.
Okay, so I mean, as I indicated before, I listened to the chair and the vice chair, and I think they made really good points that it's premature to be talking about another addendum at this point. I think the critical issue at this juncture is to get the 3 states, 2 of which have the governor's offices heavily involved in the issue, to meet with their industry and come back with recommendation for the board. With this deadline, we'll be in a position where we have the stock assessment, the benchmark stock assessment concluded, so we'll remove the uncertainty that we have right now about stock status and basically be in a position where we have recommendations from each of the jurisdictions that are involved in the in that area, and that would include, I would point out, Area 3. So you're going to have not only Area 1 but Area 3 recommendations, and we'll have the benchmark, and we can put all of those factors together, have a discussion whether or not we need to do more and why, and then decide whether or not we need to do an addendum. So I think this is to me, this is the correct way to do it. That way the states have some deadline. It's not an open-ended deadline where the industry groups are basically going to go off and meet and have endless discussions for 2, 3, 5 years. We need something that forces a resolution of a consensus at some point. So that's all I'm trying to accomplish with this. I like the original motion, but there were valid concerns raised, so I think we should pare it down. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Dennis, to you as the seconder.
Yes, thank you. Again, agreeing with what David just said, and it kind of follows my thinking. And I'd also comment that I've been informed that New Hampshire will be starting discussions with industry, I believe, in early May. Thank you.
Thanks. Richie White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I think that the states will probably not have time to get proper feedback from the stock assessment in November that's released to the public and the winter meeting to then get input from industry, a consensus from industry in the various states on changes that may not be the same as what we're dealing with now. And, you know, so, I mean, we can do this, but I doubt that there'll be time to get proper consensus from industry between November and February. So anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Thanks, David. A follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, we've had pretty extensive discussion about this. Anything additional? Emerson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually fine with this substitute. It gets to the point. that I was trying to make. I introduced that motion to generate discussion about having something in the document that says we are going to do something by a date certain. So I'm fine with this substitute. Thank you.
Thanks. Dan McKiernan.
Yes, and I'm going to repeat my opposition to this motion. I think the board should take a pass and, should approve the original premise of this addendum and then take a pass, wait for the stock assessment in October, and then there'll be clearer mandates, whether they be, biological reference points or targets for fishing mortality, et cetera, or alternatively, if the industry wants to roll up their sleeves and discuss the economics of this fishery being problematic and want to make those changes, then that's the conversation that they will have, and then they'll deliver some of those ideas to us. And I really do not want to convene my industry until the 7 Maine Zoo councils have a chance to come up with what I hope to be a consensus Maine position.
Thanks, Dan. Joe Semino.
Yeah, thanks. I guess a question, and I apologize, I really meant to ask this first time around as well. Since this is getting added to option B, then we can't repeal without also having this requirement of consensus by winter of 2026, or if after going out to public comment, would there be a way to split this again?
If I could jump in, I
Go ahead,
believe that because of the language that we have in our draft agenda that says that the board at final action can combine or choose options within the range of things that are considered, then I do think it would be able to implement option B without this clause. I think that would be within bounds, but Bob, correct me if I'm wrong.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I'll jump in. Yeah, Caitlin's right. These items could be separated even if they both fall under option B for public comment. If the board has if this is approved, public comment happens, and at the spring meeting, the board decides they don't want to include this date, then they can just go with the repealing of the gauge size changes.
Thanks, Joe. I believe that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I did see, oh, go ahead.
Renee, I just want to clarify, because I don't know, maybe I should wait if this passes or not, but I am concerned about how this reads state consensus positions and exactly what that means. Caitlin will have to explain this during public hearings. And I think what I'm hearing is that these positions could be either ways to bolster that Gulf of Maine stock. It could be a response to the stock assessment. And so I guess I just want to make sure I'm understanding that. And then a consensus position, is that just that consensus position is with the 3 states? I just want to make sure I'm correct on that.
David, as the maker, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, as far as the consensus, let me just say, I'm just trying to get the 3 jurisdictions to meet with their industry and have exactly the discussion that was just characterized, and then come back to us with their specific recommendations for that jurisdiction. I would envision as so the deadline is a target. It's not a hard date, other than the fact that we want everybody to bring us recommendations by that point. And if we require more time, then we obviously have the right to provide more time. And as to the vice chair's comment about economics, I think economics should be part of the discussion that's taking place between now and then, because I readily envision that economics is going to play a big role in the formulation of any recommendations that come out of this process, whether it takes place in the next year or 2 years. I mean, that's one of the things that's driving this whole issue. The economics are going to deteriorate, I think, dramatically for the industry because of the points that I've made at prior meeting. So I think all of this comes together. I think people are overreading what is required here. It's just a deadline. We need a report by a certain deadline. Thank you.
One more thing to jump in. I'm sorry, Renee. So when we put options in an addendum document, it locks us into compliance criteria. This is very different than the board giving some direction to the states to provide some information back to them through a board motion that you're seeking management approaches by a certain time so that then you can populate an addendum or not populate an addendum, how you move forward. But by putting it in the addendum, you're locking yourselves into this timeline. I might be more comfortable with the flexibility that it sounds like you're seeking of the different types of information is having a separate motion and not locking this into the addendum document, but giving those states this direction of what you want them to do in lieu of these management approaches. It might be a way to give yourself the flexibility of and not lock us into some more compliance criterion that you're not sure you're going to be able to meet the assessment.
Thanks, Tony. Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, this basically what is in this motion is very similar to what's in 2.2 at the present time. It says the Gulf of Maine states will hold scoping discussions with their lobster industries. And all we want is to, at some point in time, is to have them provide that information to us. It's very possible that the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, their consensus, individual state consensus positions may be very different. And all we're really looking for is some sort of information and guidance from the industry of where we're going to go. We're going to have to digest whatever we get from the three states in the event that we're going to have to take or choose to take some action next year or at some downstream time. That's all.
Jeff, and then we've had a lot of discussion here, so unless it's substantially different, we'll try to move ourselves forward. But Jeff, go ahead.
No, it's not. I'm just taking I'm taking the right to respond as a sponsor of the previous motion. And just to say that I do support this. I think it's an improvement, but I made the point earlier that I think it would be helpful for the public to realize the timing that was discussed by Dan, including the timing of when we would expect the new assessment. I think without a motion, I'm hoping that information could be added to a preamble just to help the public with a little better understanding of where we are, and particularly with the new assessment coming in. But I do support the motion. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Megan.
Thanks. Yeah, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think this provides a lot of clarity for Maine, that folks are looking for clear expectations and timeline, which I can't argue with. I think if the board wants to pass this type of motion, my recommendation would be to actually do this outside of the addendum, because I think that does get into some murky territory on compliance criteria. I just don't know how to interpret that or answer questions on that. So again, I think that makes me a little nervous on this, but I understand the intent and what people are trying to do. And perhaps this is best, again, as a discussion in May, where if this similar type of motion comes up, kind of disassociated from the addendum, I think that might be a better path. Thanks.
Thanks, Megan. Richie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Megan and Dan, and I think that I think we're all in agreement for this information to come back to the board to help the board make a decision in the future. But I don't think this is the place to do that, and therefore I'll be opposing this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Richie. I did see a public hand a little while back, so I'm just going to very briefly go out to the public, make sure that we didn't miss any comments specific to this motion. Just a second. And David, I see your hand. One moment. Okay, go ahead, David.
David, you're self-muted.
Excuse me, I double clicked. I'm not opposed to the point that has been made by Megan and Richie. And let me just suggest, I don't want to do this myself because I don't think I can legally do it. Have somebody table this until the May meeting, and then we'll reconsider whether or not we need to do something.
You can postpone your own motion. It's fine, David.
Well, I think it would be better if another board member did that. Thank you.
That being said, this is still a motion to substitute, so I do think we need to get back to a main motion, right?
I don't believe so. I think you can postpone the whole concept.
Megan Ware.
Okay, well, given that comment, then I'll make the motion to table to the May board meeting. I think it's a little weird with the option in the addendum, or this proposing an option in the addendum, but I think this will bring us to a conversation in May where we can pass or consider this type of motion, again, kind of disassociated from the addendum. So I move to table till May.
It would be
Jackie.
postponed until May, correct? Tabling is within a meeting, I think.
That is how I.
Postponing sounds great.
Yep.
And Matt Gates, I see your hand up. Was that to second the motion?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I don't know that we need any additional rationale there, but if either of you have a burning desire, feel free to add some. Megan, I don't know if you have anything additional.
I think I've said my piece. Thank you, though.
Matt, anything to
Yeah,
add?
No, I think Megan made some good points there. I think, perhaps moving this outside of the addendum process might be more appropriate. So I think we can just have that discussion in May would be best. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. David, I see your hand up. Is that residual? The hand is down.
Yes.
Dennis,
Yep.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Is that me that you just called?
Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I'll pull a Pat Augustine here and move the question and have us vote on this at this time. Thank you.
That was my next step had you beat me to it. So let's go ahead and call the question. Let me try this first. Is there any opposition to the motion on the board? Okay, I see Allie Murphy from NOAA Fisheries.
I think.
Okay, I see some hands. Oh, go ahead. Allie, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No opposition from me, but I'd like to abstain.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Seeing an additional hand, Tony, does that lead us to calling the vote here?
Yep. If New York is voting in opposition, then yes, we would need to call the vote.
Oppose.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's call the vote then.
this is Megan. I just want to, it says May 2026. I just want to, I think
25.
the idea was, to 2020. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. For those that are in favor of the motion on the board, please raise your hand.
I'm just going to let the hand settle for a second. Virginia, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, New Hampshire, and Maine. I will lower the hands for you guys. Opposition.
New York is going to vote null, N-U-L-L.
Okay.
Thanks, Emerson. And abstentions?
No
See-
official.
Thanks, Tony. And any additional no votes? Seeing
me.
none, Tony, do you mind helping me with the count on this one?
Caitlin, it's am I correct in 8011?
That's what I got.
Okay, the motion carries. Are there any other motions to come before the board? We still have a document to get out to the public. Megan Ware, go ahead.
Yep, I would move to approve addendum 32 for public comment.
David, I see your hand. Is that a second?
That's second.
Megan, any rationale?
No, I think we've had a lengthy discussion. Thank you.
As do I. David, anything additional?
Nothing additional.
Okay. Anybody have any burning comments on this before we call the vote?
Not a burning comment, but just to let you know that Caitlin and I will work in the timing of the assessment to the background section of the document, so it's not a surprise.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you for responding to the board member's request there. All right, let's call the question. We'll try this one more time. Do we have any opposition to the motion on the board to approve draft addendum 32 for public comment? And I see Noah Fisheries. Allie, is that an abstention?
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Tony, I believe we can move forward by consensus. Is that correct?
Yep. You just say it would carry by consensus with one abstention from Noah Fisheries.
Okay, great. Motion passes with consensus. Noah Fisheries with one abstention. Okay, that's the main event for today. Is there any other business to come before the Lobster Board today? Seeing no hands, thank you all for your support in my first meeting, and thank you for the robust discussion. It was helpful for all of us. Thank you to the public for their attendance. And we have one hand up. Is this other business to come before the board?
I just was wondering about public comment, when that would come up.
Sure. Caitlin, do you want to review the public comment timeline in the presentation? And
We can make a public comment now.
Same, we did it at the beginning of the meeting, but if you can keep it very fast, then it's up, you know, that Renee had asked for a public comment at the very beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
But
I will go very quickly. That's okay.
go ahead, Sam, just keep it brief. Thanks.
Good day, Madam Chair, board members, and members of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. I'm Sam Blatchley. I'm counsel for Outer Capes Lobstermen's Association. We have 34 permit holders. We submitted a detailed written comment opposing draft addendum 32's proposal to standardize the VNOT's possession definition for the OCC permit holders to 1/8 inch with or without cedal hairs. I just want to note, as we referenced in our written comment in 2000 following a federal lawsuit, the Outer Capes Lobstermen's Association, ASMFC, and the Mass DMF reached a judicially supervised settlement agreement. The agreement, which was informed by a scientific analysis, allowed the OCC to adopt a conservation equivalency measure, a minimum gauge size increase to 3 5/16 inch in lieu of mandatory V-notching. I just want to mention Bruce Estrella, the then senior marine fisheries biologist at DMF, and Robert Glenn, then a marine fisheries biologist and now deputy director of the DMF, conducted a conservation equivalency review. And using the egg per recruit model developed by Joseph Edwin of NIMS, employed by ASMFC across U.S. lobster stocks, Deputy Director Glenn's 2000 analysis demonstrated that the OCC's plan yielded a 1.338% increase in egg production, over 2.5 times the 0.502% increase under the ASMFC's then existing measures of a 3 1/4 inch gauge and V-notching. Former DMF Director Philip Coates stated in the Cape Cod Times, our most important coastal species, and we're not going to save the lobster resource with V-notching and a maximum gauge. In my heart, I know the Outer Cape lobstermen are correct. There should be real trap reduction and increase in the minimum size. His successor, Paul Diodati, sought to extend this model statewide, recognize its efficacy. Just briefly, the Outer Capes Lobstermen's Association membership is notably younger than other lobster management areas and reflects a thriving fishery that attracts new entrants. We believe Addendum 32 threatens to unravel this proven framework, lacks a conservation basis, and breaches a legally binding agreement upheld by the OCC for 24 years. Meanwhile, it spares Maine from gauge increases despite Addendum 27's original intent to protect the Gulf of Maine Georges bag spawning stock. bowing to political pressure from the many at the expense of the few. This is not repeal, as draft addendum 32 claims, but a selective rollback that undermines the OCC's contributions, which have boosted egg production by 2.5 times. It's not contrary to law. It is poor fishery management. It dismisses science, fairness, and precedent, risking litigation that the OCLA, Outer Capes Lobstermen Association, though reluctant, stands ready to pursue by reopening our federal case to enforce the 2000 settlement. And then in closing, we urge that the ASMFC reject draft addendum 32's proposal to standardize the V-notch possession definition for OCC permit holders to 1/8 inch with or without cedal hairs. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for letting me talk out of order there.
Thanks for your comment, Sam. Matt Gates, I saw your hand. Did you have some additional business for the board?
I'm not sure why that was up, but
That's okay. Okay. All that said, we are adjourned for today. Thank you all for your time.